I'm Creeson, Agecoutay. Thank you for joining us. Saskatchewan RCMP are renewing their calls for tips regarding a fatal hit and run that happened in the Red Earth First Nation last February. On February 12th, early Monday morning at around 4:30 a.m., Carrot River RCMP responded to an injured person on Highway 163 in Red Earth First Nation. 31-year-old Erickson Bear was located and pronounced dead. Officers later determined he was struck by a vehicle that fled the scene. Bear was a resident from Red Earth, and RCMP are currently in the First Nation continuing their investigation this week. Red Earth is located about 220 kilometers east of Prince Albert. Anyone with information about the incident is asked to contact RCMP or Crime Stoppers. A new report has been released this week that focuses on the circumstances surrounding fire-related deaths among Indigenous people from 2011 to 2020. The report released by Statistics Canada was prepared for and sponsored by the National Indigenous Fire Safety Council. According to researcher Len Garris of the Indigenous Fire Safety Council, the findings were not surprising. Fire-related mortality rates were found to be significantly higher among First Nations, Métis, and Inuit. Garris found poor housing, the lack of smoke detectors, and crowded homes continue to be a huge factor. Among the Inuit, they are 17 times more likely to die in a house fire compared to the rest of Canada. Garris says a quick way to save lives is by adding smoke detectors to every home.
And British Columbia is the opposite of all the other provinces in terms of the ratio of fire deaths associated to the population. So what I know happened in British Columbia is in 2012, they started an aggressive smoke alarm campaign. And between 2012 and today, they've installed nearly 20,000 smoke alarms in First Nations communities in British Columbia. And there we're seeing the death rates are phenomenally lower.
The International Joint Commission has its first Indigenous woman serving as a commissioner. Dr. Susan Chiblo is from the Northern Ontario community of Garden River First Nation and is an assistant professor at the School of Environmental Sciences at the University of Guelph. APTN's Mike McDonald reports.
The International Joint Commission deals with issues affecting waterways along the Canada-U.S. border, including the approval of projects affecting water levels and flows across the border, and investigating issues and recommending solutions. Its newest commissioner, Dr. Susan Chiblo, has been working with First Nation communities for more than 30 years and has an extensive background in environmental science.
I have also done my PhD with a focus on Nibi Kendaswin Min, which is our water knowledge, Anishinaabe water knowledge. And I've always had a relationship, I suppose, I can say, with water, and always as an Anishinaabe woman and learning about my responsibilities. And one of those are to protect the water.
Chiblo grew up in Garden River, a community east of Sault Ste. Marie, located on the banks of the St. Mary's River, which connects Lake Superior and Lake Huron. She says her culture continues to play a significant role in her professional life.
My understanding from the teachings that I've received by numerous Anishinaabe women is that we have that role to protect the water because only women can carry that water lodge. And so the women's voices need to be at the table. And in the past, there were no women in water decision making, not even non-Indigenous women.
Chiblo says it's important for Indigenous voices to be heard.
I've always been told that we need to be everywhere. And when we are everywhere, then we are recognized, then our knowledge is recognized and our voices are heard. So I'm grateful to have this opportunity to be in this position.
Chiblo was once the environmental coordinator for the Chiefs of Ontario. She continues to work with First Nation communities and elders as an Anishinaabe advisor on environmental projects and policy analysis. Mike McDonald, APTN National News, Sault Ste. Marie.
Thank you, Mike. More and more often, tourism is being used as an industry to help Indigenous communities showcase their culture and share their story of this country. Our reporter Charlotte Mort-Jacobs takes a look at one fishing lodge paving the way north of 60.
Under the midnight sun on the secluded shores of Lac La Martre, the fish are biting. Guests from as far away as Australia and Italy will travel here to experience the pristine wilderness. And who better to showcase it than those from here, the Clintcho people. But it wasn't always that way.
In Belgrade, this is Tsonti. Tsonti.
Archie Natsiza helped build the guest cabins here in the 1970s. He remembers the disconnect felt by locals seeing outsiders call the shots.
Some of the elders, they don't really like it. The Americans, they come in here and they take all the fish and they just catch it and then they throw it back in the water. And then the fish, they get sore on the neck and then they die there. Yeah. Some of this, they see them, if they go out on a lake, they see the fish floating.
Up until 2023, Americans owned this fishing lodge. At that point, the economic arm of the Clintcho Nation bought out the shares, making this viable tourism business 100% First Nation owned and operated. Clintcho Adventures Director of Tourism Samantha Stewart says they're diversifying their portfolio to increase employment opportunities for locals.
More youth get involved and create a few more positions. So cultural experiences, supervisor, tour liaisons, elder in residence is something we're trying to incorporate as well as we diversify the tourism here into extending the season into Aurora tourism and more workshops, healing programs.
I know where all the fish are. I know where all the animal moose and the woodland caribou.
Natsiza is an elder in residence here from the small Dene community of Wati, some 40 kilometers away.
We're teaching all these young guys, the one that they don't have a job or they don't go to school. So they come over here and we try to teach them how to do guiding.
Clintcho Adventures is engaging with the community by ensuring the stories behind important spots on the lake, like this old fish camp, are part of the experience.
So having Archie and Michelle out here is a great opportunity as I do more strategic planning and business planning to hear their perspectives on the land and the area and the people, and then incorporating some cultural protocols into the tourism offerings here, whether it's something small like land acknowledgements or something bigger like knowing where the animals are tracking throughout the year, how we can work with the community on things like fishing derbies and more day trips out of Wati.
Michelle Moosenose is another local elder in residence. He's excited to share stories of growing up setting nets to feed his family's dog team. He also wants to incorporate the language Clintcho Yati at the lodge.
Well, some places, islands, like, we have names for it, eh? In Creeson, we had names, like around the lake, yeah? It has a name on it, just like across the river here from a big island. That one too, like it has a name in Dargab, eh? Yeah.
The lodge will host over 200 clients this summer. Kitchen and hospitality manager Debbie Porter is not only satiating their appetites, as an Anishinaabe from the Sagamok First Nation, she's taking pride in what she sees as a surge in Indigenous tourism across the country.
It makes it more interesting. It does. It makes it more interesting. And, being as we get all of our people from usually the States, they find that super interesting that we're telling them things, from the land or from this region.
John Simpson has been guiding here since 2011.
Yeah, my grandfather worked here, my father worked here before.
What keeps you coming back?
Well, just like meeting new people, from the state, that's why, and well, I want to know what's it like over there.
A man of few words, Simpson says guiding is simple. Make safety a priority and keep landing trophy fish. Charlotte Mart Jacobs, APTN National News, Lac La Marte, Northwest Territories.
Beautiful country. We have to take a short break, but when we return, we'll tell you all about a wrestling tour that has been traveling to remote First Nations. We're back in about 3 minutes. Stay with us. Welcome back. For over 30 years, a wrestling promotion called the Death Tour has brought pro wrestling to remote First Nations across northern Manitoba. Now a documentary film is shining a spotlight on the tour and the communities it impacts. Here's reporter Sierra Bettens with more.
Growing up in the Mississippiwistic Cree Nation in Manitoba, filmmaker Sonia Ballantyne remembers the excitement she felt when a wrestling tour came to her community.
When I was a little girl, I encountered the Death Tour on one of its summer tours. So when I was about 5 or 6, I met the wrestler Adam Copeland, who wrestles as Edge. And I remember being so terrified of him because I had never really met that many white folks. And so like having this 6-foot-tall white guy with like big blue eyes, I was like, oh my God, no. And so it was really cool because it was the first time I had ever met like a wrestler, and wrestling seemed
Decades later,
real to me.
Ballantyne's first feature-length film is a documentary on the same tour that got her hooked. Co-directed by Ballantyne and Stefan Peterson, the Death Tour follows 4 wrestlers braving ice roads and isolation on the 2-week tour across remote Indigenous communities. Wrestling promoter Tony Condello founded the Death Tour in the 1980s. Chris Jericho, the film's executive producer, is among the many wrestling legends who got their start on the tour.
A lot of the issues we talk about in the film specifically look at like how the communities live, and how Tony's tour is often the only non-community organized event that comes up there.
Sage Morin is a wrestler from the Saddle Lake Cree Nation in Alberta. Morin turned to the sport on her healing journey after her 2-year-old son Gio was tragically killed by a drunk driver in 2013. In the ring, she goes by the matriarch.
I wanted to have a lot of kids, and I ended up being a wrestler instead. And as Indigenous people, the strongest in our societies is without a doubt the matriarch. And I right away knew that I wanted to emulate, not just be a wrestler who was Indigenous, but I wanted to be an Indigenous wrestler and have my identity right there at the forefront.
Growing up in the Northwest Territories, Des Lorraine, aka the Eskimofo, dreamed of being a wrestler, but never expected to go pro. In 2019, he founded Totally Arctic Wrestling to bring the sport to the north.
So we were really remote. Wrestling had only come to our community one time, and it was fly in, and so it wasn't going to come back. So we kind of figured we would have to teach ourselves. So, I told people that I wanted to start it up, and they sent us a boxing ring, and it was hard to learn in that, but that's what we learned to wrestle in.
Outside the Death Tour ring, the wrestlers act as role models to the students, giving school presentations on topics like bullying, drugs, and mental health. In some cases, the tour arrived in communities dealing with recent youth deaths by suicide. Morn and Lorraine say the connections they made with students were priceless.
Thinking about the connections that we made with the youth, it's something that I really hold near and dear to my heart. It makes me emotional, last night when we watched the film in theaters, I was there just crying. I had to go up on stage with my mascara all over my face after.
As the cast and crew gears up for a cross-Canada screening tour, Ballantyne reflects on the generational legacy the tour has left on Indigenous communities.
Because it's about underdogs overcoming impossible odds. And I think that's why Indigenous people really connect with wrestling, specifically professional wrestling, because we have also been underdogs who have persevered over insurmountable odds.
The Death Tour will premiere in Winnipeg on Friday at the Dave Barber Cinematheque and hits theaters across Canada throughout August. Sierra Bettens, APTN National News, Winnipeg.
That's what I live for. Great job to everyone involved in that film. The Anishinabemo in Star Wars A New Hope premiered in Winnipeg last night. You could feel the pride inside the venue, where many carried lightsabers and wore their cultural items. It started with a grand entry and speeches from dignitaries, and even a choir that played Star Wars themed music. It was an experience many won't soon forget.
Can I do it in Ojibwe?
Definitely.
Our language, Ojibwe, to hear it on screen, that means a lot to us speakers because we want to revitalize the language.
The language needs to continue to evolve, to talk about things that like people are talking about now. Like we're talking about space, we're talking about blasters and lightsabers and all of that. And so having language to talk about that is really great, and that's how languages continue to survive.
I'm reconnecting with my culture, and I've just started taking some Anishinaabe classes. So I feel like a lot of it will not sink in, but I think that it's really important to have these resources.
I grew up on the Mississippic First Nation, and I thought I was the only Indigenous nerd anywhere. And so to see so many Indigenous people here tonight is so cool to me because I'm like, it's healing my inner child.
How many premiers do you know that can make sounds like Chewy? Our very own T.R. Wheatley will have that full story for you from that premiere tonight on APTN National News. Make sure to join us then. The Mi'kmaq are taking the province of New Brunswick and the feds to court over lands and waters being developed without First Nations consent. We'll talk to one of the chiefs involved when we come back in less than 3 minutes. Stick around. Over on the East Coast, St. John's 20, Charlottetown 23. Anujiwak 23, the Grand River 25. Val-d'Or 21, Saguenay 24. Peterborough 24, Toronto 25. Sioux Lookout 20, Timmins 21. Puckatawagan 27, Churchill 23. Winnipeg 24, Barons River 23. In Regina it's 22, Yorkton 20. La Ronge 23, Uranium City 27. Northern AB High Level 29, Peace River 27. Medicine Hat 25, Edmonton 25. Tofino 20, Kamloops 32. Fort Nelson 32, Smithers 31. Watson Lake 31, Mayo 25. Yellowknife 24, Norman Wells 36. Sax Harbor 15, Colville Lake 30. Baker Lake 29, Chesterfield 27. And Arctic Bay 10, Clyde River 5. 8 Mi'kmaq communities are taking the New Brunswick and federal governments to court. They claim their ancestral lands and waters were developed without their consent. The Mi'kmaq filed a statement of claims seeking compensation after negotiations failed. They also want to be part of any decision-making process around future development in their territory. Chief Terry Richardson of the Pabonneau Mi'kmaq Nation explains what this lawsuit means to the Mi'kmaq and citizens of New Brunswick. Thank you for joining us, Chief Richardson. The land and water title claim is most of the province of New Brunswick. Why did talks with governments fail?
Well, Creeson, I guess the simple answer to that is that what's happened is the government refuses to come to the table and negotiate. You know, there's always 2 routes to go in solving a problem: litigation and negotiation. And this province, in the province of New Brunswick, we're very unfortunate. We have a government that refuses to negotiate with First Nations. So we've been led down the road of litigation, which is very, very unfortunate.
I'm sorry to hear that. The spokesperson for New Brunswick's Premier, Blaine Higgs, told APTN News the Mi'kmaq had preconditions to negotiations and that they would not waver. What were those preconditions, and is that what led to filing this lawsuit?
Well, you know, we tried to get to the table. We've been trying to talk with them since April. We've said, you know, let's come to the table and let's negotiate and have these talks. As you're probably aware, the Wolastoqey of New Brunswick have already filed their claim in advance of our claim, and we took a different approach of trying to negotiate with this province. 4 years I've been chief, unable to come to the table with this particular government, and it's very unfortunate because, again, they've led us down this road of litigation, and it's not good for anybody because it just creates bad feelings. It prevents investment in the province. It's not good for the province either, and it's not good for the taxpayers of New Brunswick. You know, they're going to be charged money here, and it's going to cost them money for lawyers, cost us money for lawyers, creates more bad feelings. So, you know, we did try. We didn't have any pre-agreements with them. We just wanted to get, you know, what we basically set out saying we want to say in what happens in the land and the resources in the province of New Brunswick.
private properties such as homes and cottages are not included in the lawsuit like you were talking there, but do you know if the title claim impacts other private landowners?
It would not. You know, we're going after the Crown. That's who we brought to we're going to. It's their responsibility. At the end of the day, they're the ones who have actually given away this land. We've signed peace and friendship treaties in the province of New Brunswick. That's what sets the standard. And the particular government of New Brunswick has never honored that. And so we're taking the government of New Brunswick to court. We're not taking particular landowners, but we haven't closed the door. We've said, we're willing to sit at the table and negotiate. But again, this government refuses to do that.
What type of compensation are you and the other chiefs hoping for?
Well, you know what? We've had resources that have been taken away from this province for time immemorial, since we've been here. And we've watched industry, as one of my elders in one of our communities stated, we've watched industry pass us by, taking away these resources. At what benefit to First Nations? None. Zero. So we were holding this government to account for that. I mean, we have a government where they've come in with like a bull in a china cabinet. They've come in and they've taken away our tax agreement that we had in the province of New Brunswick, which was one of the only things we had that was creating opportunity and economic growth. It was costing the province roughly about $75 million a year. We came with a solution to this government and said, let's cap it and let's allow our First Nations to grow economically. He refused to accept that. He basically axed it. Now here we are, well, let's negotiate on the land side. Let's negotiate on resource development. Refuses to do that. So it's very difficult to work with a government that's unwilling to work with First Nations. And that's where we are in New Brunswick. We have a premier and this particular government that refuses to negotiate and come to the table with First Nations.
Any final thoughts or message to the province regarding this fight right now?
I guess the message I would say is we've got to get on that range of negotiation. And right now, we're not on the range of negotiation with a premier and a government that is using the negotiate-told approach. They're telling us what it's going to be, and they're not willing to even get on that range of negotiation. So that's all we're asking. Come to the table. Let's negotiate. But if not, we're going to go to court. And if we go to court, it's going to be a long battle, going to create a lot of bad feelings, going to cost money to both sides. And then at the end of the day, you're going to go to the Supreme Court where they're going to tell you in return, you go to the table and negotiate. But why would we want to negotiate? We're only going to have a harder stance when you negotiate if you're forced to negotiate, and we'll leave it to the courts if it comes down to that, and that's the reality of it. We have precedents that have been set. We look at what's happened in Ontario right now, where the land claim has been settled and is in the process of going through where they've been told, go back to the table and negotiate. It will only cost more in the long term and bad feelings. What we're looking for is let's work together. Let's get to the table, negotiate. And for the province of New Brunswick, that's what we're telling the people in the province of New Brunswick. We need a government that's willing to negotiate and work with people, not divide people.
Well, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you for your time, Chief Richardson.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
That's your midday newscast for this Friday, August 9th. Our evening APTN National newscast with Dennis Ward will be in a few hours' time. Make sure to join us then for more news stories. From everyone at APTN National News, hi miigwech masicho. Thank you for watching.